following podcast is a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be sent to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.
You want me to play something for you?
Yeah, that's it. Play something.
All right.
This is Eddie Bravo Radio.
Why don't you do a question everything show? It's not conspiracy. We're just questioning stuff. Why don't you do a show?
Eddie is the real deal.
Temperature of the water getting sucked into the turbines.
It's heat turbines. Like we didn't hear that.
Exactly.
Like we haven't heard that a million times. It's the engine and the air.
Eddie Bravo,
Eddie, stay calm. Eddie, stay calm. It's like, wait a minute.
That's with us. Eddie Bravo, I love you.
Are you trying to tell me that the engine
Yes, that's what we're trying to tell you. Yeah, yeah.
has heat
Yes.
and then makes
Yes.
clouds?
Yes, Eddie.
Are you sure? That's right.
Winding him up. Winding him up. Winding him up.
You know the
Ladies and gentlemen, another episode of Chaos.
Yo, Eddie Bravo Radio back. One more time. Shit. Damn, one more time. Joining me, my co-host, my brother from another mother. We came out to Hollywood back in 1991 to conquer the music business. It didn't work out so well, but he's still here with me, James Watson.
That's me in the house.
Also joining me today, special guest co-host, a BJJ American icon, a creator of the Donkey Guard, Jeff Pipe Layer Glover. Behind the curtain, TJ DeSantis, how you doing?
I'm good. I got a broken microphone over here. It's broken. I sound like. Can I take your order?
Yo.
You want fries with that?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, that's good enough. We're going to get right to it. My guest tonight, this is his second appearance on Eddie Bravo Radio. I had him maybe 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. He is the founder of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, Richard Gage.
Hey.
Man, the whole Tower 7 thing for me, it's kind of like a little hashtag thing. People, comment on my Instagram. I bring it up because if it's 2017 and if you still think that 47-story skyscraper collapsed because it got too hot, then it's going to be very hard to talk to you about anything else. That's the gatekeeper right there. Like, if Tower 7 looks fishy to you, you looked into it and you did all the research and you just watch the video. I mean, there's 5 angles. You just watch the video, and that doesn't look fishy to you, then my guess is that you're part of this mass hypnosis program going on and you're just caught up in it. It's not your fault. You're not dumb. You're not an idiot, but something got your brain. Anyways, Richard Gage, what is give us a little background on how you got into the whole 9/11 truth movement, and take us right when you discovered there was something fishy about Tower 7 and the whole 9/11 thing.
I was minding my own business, Eddie. I was just doing my job. I'm an architect. I was coming back from a construction observation meeting in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm hearing on the radio, this is the Guns and Butter program, FM radio in Pacifica station, Bonnie Faulkner's program. And she's interviewing David Ray Griffin. Now, this is like the grandfather of the 9/11 truth movement, if you will. He's talking about all of these hundreds of witnesses that Thomas von Esten, the fire commissioner, recorded a month after 9/11, all of whom are, well, a large percentage of whom, more than 118, are talking about sounds of explosions, flashes of light, being blown around the building, experiencing these explosions. He's talking about freely flying structural steel sections sent out laterally at 60 miles an hour, laterally, hundreds and hundreds of them out of the Twin Towers with trailing thick white smoke clouds. And I'm going, what are you talking about? I would have heard about all this. I mean, these are 4-ton structural steel sections. And he's talking about molten metal, pools of it in the basements of these twin towers in the bottom of the pile of this World Trade Center 7, which I'd never heard of in 5 years. This is 5 years after 9/11. I just swallowed the official story, hook, line, and sinker. So I'm going, what? A third tower? And I go, this is crazy. I mean, I'm a member of the American Institute of Architects, and I had not heard anything from the AIA about a third skyscraper, 47 stories tall, part of the World Trade Center complex. And in the afternoon of 9/11, 7 hours after the Twin Towers came down, this building, after witnesses hear explosions, this building drops like a rock straight down, uniformly, symmetrically, into its own footprint, and free fall acceleration. I mean, as fast as this pen falling from my hand. And that happens in under 7 seconds, in the exact manner of a classic controlled demolition. And yet we're told by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, who was tasked by Congress to explain this to us, to the American people.
Years later, right? It wasn't right away. Like no one knew about it.
Well, they fumbled this football for 7 years. In 2008, the final report came out. You know what they found to be the cause of this building's collapse? Normal office fires. Office fires have never, ever brought down a skyscraper before 9/11. And there's been 100 of them. I mean, much hotter, larger, longer lasting in these buildings. So this is insane. So when you start to look at that, okay, well, let me see this building. And sure enough, this sucker, I hope you can show your audience, this is absolutely incredible. It just drops in the exact manner like the old hotels in Las Vegas.
Can you put that up?
I'll put on the TV.
It's just Tower 7 collapse.
Yeah, WTC 7 collapse. They're all over the place. It's incredible. And so when architects see this, they go, wait, I didn't know about this. I mean, the vast majority of them know nothing about the third worst structural failure in modern history.
The vast majority of
architects and engineers.
People are
structural engineers.
People are under the assumption that they all know about it. Well, they do.
And they don't, because we're at the conferences. Every year we go to state and national conferences, and we have a booth, and we have the building coming down there again and again and again. There's 11 different videos. And we look at it, we said, did you know what this is? And he said, well, it looks like a controlled demolition. Well, yeah, it does to us too. Do you know this came down on 9/11? This was the third tower that came down. I didn't know about a third tower. The vast majority of them.
They allow you to set up a booth at their conventions?
Still to this day, a lot of people don't know
How come they haven't stopped you?
They did stop us. This is the first year in 10 years that we have not been allowed to put up a booth at the AIA convention.
Did stop you.
Yeah, here it is going down. Watch this. You have the East Penthouse dropping first, a half a second prior to the overall building coming down, indicating complete core column removal, if you will. How do you remove a core column? Well, you have to use preset cutter charges, explosives, shaped cutter charges. That's the only way. And then a half a second, all the perimeter columns. That's how you bring a building down as fast as a bowling ball falling out of the sky. That's the only way. That means not one of those columns gave any resistance to that building's collapse.
All right, can I ask something again? Like, I'm the guy who doesn't know anything about this stuff, but I thought only 2 towers fell.
Right.
But there were 2 planes, correct?
There were 2 planes, and they hit 2 towers.
So why did this one fall? If no
it wasn't a
plane hit
tower. It was just a building, right?
Exactly.
The Twin Towers were the towers. This was
is
just
a
really
tower.
big building.
It's a high rise.
I mean, this thing was huge.
Stories is a tall.
It was huge.
It's a tower. Yeah.
I heard something. It was like one of the largest. If it was demolition, controlled demolition, it would have been one of the largest buildings to ever be controlled demolition, and it would be like a cap in their feather. I heard somebody say this would be quite a accomplishment for a group of people.
Yeah,
you know, blowing up a building, like it came down like perfect. It didn't land on any other buildings.
It must have been hard to bite their tongue and not take credit for the largest.
You really didn't know that 3 buildings went down?
No,
for
like
real?
I said, I don't follow this stuff. And
a lot of people still don't really have time or care about this.
The official story was 2 buildings. The Twin Towers came down.
Well, they acknowledge a third tower came down because it just came down in front of God and everybody. everybody. Videos caught it. They had to explain it, right?
But I mean,
So-
how
But
long
not
has it
a-
been now? It's been 16 years. You
And
know what
he
I mean?
didn't
So,
know.
like,
Most people still don't
Most
know
people-
because it's not on the mainstream media.
No, and it's not even provided to architects and engineers by the American Society of Civil Engineers, to their structural engineers, the American Institute of Architects, of which I'm a member. We have not had one report on the third worst structural failure in modern history. That's unconscionable.
Was it botched? Was it a bot? Were there supposed to be like, maybe I'm just, I just had an idea that popped in my head. Maybe that third tower, right, was supposed to get hit by a plane as well. And whatever, that plane went down somewhere else. So it took them like another 12 hours to get it together and make that third tower go down that didn't get hit by the plane.
That's possible, but
You
there's
know what I'm
another
saying?
theory too, and that is that it was supposed to go down earlier in the day. It was announced by CNN that a 50-story building went down. Was it CNN? Yeah, CNN.
Oh, they reported it before
BBC.
Before it even
Well,
happened.
that's another one. Yeah.
So they're getting reports. So these media guys are getting reports getting sent from somebody who already knows about this
Apparently.
before it was happening.
Doesn't it take
That's fishy.
weeks to set it up?
Yeah, it takes probably months to engineer and place these explosives.
But the
in
really
thousands
good
of
guys,
columns and beams.
the really good guys could do it in like 3-4 days. I'm guessing, right? Like if
I
you get
doubt
the
it.
best dudes, I mean,
I don't think so. Maybe a team of 100 very well executed, but I mean that
Yeah.
would be so obvious. You
What
know?
about the theory that building, since it housed some intelligence offices like naval intelligence, right, and CIA offices?
Not naval, but the IRS, the FBI, the Department of Defense, the Securities and Exchange Commission lost
Enron,
hundreds of files, including Enron cases. So that crippled those cases.
yeah, it's covering up stuff. Basically,
Joe Rogan
Maybe.
said that he thinks that maybe the building was built rigged to blow up just in case terrorists invaded, and they had to so that they wouldn't steal any secrets, that they could just blow up the building. He believes that.
Well,
that makes sense to me.
That's highly unlikely. I mean, you
Like
You don't want people getting your
It
documents.
was set. It was built with explosives ready to go.
They don't even last that long. I mean, you can't even 15 years later. I mean, this building was built in the late.
Yeah, how long does TNT sit there
in the
before
middle
it's
80s.
useless?
It doesn't last 20 years, and that building was built 30 years ago. So, we can't even test the residue now for explosives because it just degrades. So, but what has been done by FEMA, interestingly enough, who came out with the first report in May of 2002. And the Building Performance Assessment Report in Appendix C is a detailed metallurgical analysis, which includes a couple of pieces of steel saved from building 7, and one of the only pieces of steel saved from this building, because the rest of it was sent to China for recycling within 2 weeks after 9/11, before forensic investigators could get their hands on it.
So they're hiding all this material. So they were hiding all the material that got blown up, so we can't look at it. And
Well, they did look at it. Jonathan Barnett led a team, and they documented this very careful. He says the ends of the beams were partially evaporated. That takes 4,000 degree temperatures to evaporate steel. How does that happen? Office fires only get to be about 500, maybe 1,000 degrees, especially in this building. If you look at the fires, bring up the fires in Building 7, you'll see a few small scattered fires. They're very small and very scattered. And so in this metallurgical analysis, they document hot sulfur corrosion attack on the steel, the melting of with iron, molten iron. This is not just molten steel. Molten iron, it's the byproduct of thermite, an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. So this is the only rational explanation for the melting of this steel and iron, and the hot sulfur corrosion attack, sulfur coming from added to thermite to become thermate, much more effective at cutting through steel. So this is just dead on evidence, in addition to what is found by the U.S. Geological Survey in all the dust. They find these curious microspheres, previously molten iron microspheres. And here's the fires we have in the building right now. As you can see, they're just few small and scattered. And then the 12th floor.
So what caused those fires if a plane didn't land?
Right? It looks like my guess is they set those goddamn things on fire, right?
Well, that's possible. Actually, it's curious because they're on the back side of the building from the Twin Towers. There were some beams that flew out, as we talked about, 300 to 600 feet from the Twin Towers in every direction. Some of them hit this building, and many of them hit other buildings and caused some fires as well.
They'd be like flaming pillars to come out, correct?
Yeah, probably.
Well, why? Yeah, that's another question. Why are structural steel members ejected laterally out of the Twin Towers, flaming with molten metal dripping out and trailed by thick white smoke clouds, which is another byproduct of thermite, aluminum oxide gas?
And what's the official story for that? Why? What's the official reason they have for steel beams shooting out of the windows like this, which seems to look like something exploded and got blown the fuck out of a window?
Oh yeah, right? Up to 80 miles an hour is clocked by physicists.
Oh, it's smashing everything
That's what they're saying.
down,
The pancake.
It's blowing the pancake, and it's blowing shit to the side.
Well, that's what they say. This is going to cause some of these beams to drift.
Maybe
but they're not going to
paper.
drift 600 feet in every direction.
I mean, I could see that, like the pancake thing, like blowing paper out, right? You know, like a bunch of paperwork on a desk, or like maybe a desk or something. But steel beams, from like a gust of wind falling down,
4-ton steel
and like,
beams.
nah, dude,
It's
impaled in the side of other buildings.
It's easy to convince people that planes brought the Twin Towers down. It's pretty
because
easy
of those massive explosions
it's
of
pretty
jet
easy.
fuel.
But based on the fact that Tower 7 also went down in the same fashion, a detective might speculate that those buildings would have gone down whether planes hit them or not, right? Like a detective, he might speculate.
Well,
could the planes cause that kind of damage?
Even NIST acknowledges that 90% of the jet fuel burned up outside the building.
Can you quickly?
And the rest was gone in just 10 minutes.
What is NIST?
So we have normal office fires in the Twin Towers following for 45 minutes to an hour and a half after. NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Are they a government agency?
Yeah.
Is it an agency filled with scientists?
Yeah, theoretically.
So it's so
they're the official word.
NIST it stands for
National Institute of Standards and Technology. They're under the Commerce Department, which was under the Bush administration.
So they get government checks.
Oh yeah.
And the scientists, they're basically a group of scientists.
Yeah.
And they like solve problems. What do? What does NIST do?
Well, they measure stuff. They do research. In fact, they did research, curiously enough, into nanothermite. And they brought in experts in nanothermite.
Before 9/11?
Yes.
What?
The guy, yeah.
I didn't know that. That's hysterical.
This is amazing. They
brilliant.
brought in Foreman Williams, for instance, from the SAIC, one of the largest national defense contractors who specializes in superthermites, nanothermite. And so they were fully capable of finding all of these curious red-gray chips themselves in all the dust. Didn't have to wait for this international team of independent scientists led by Niels Harrit from Copenhagen, who documented in a 24-page peer-reviewed paper these red-gray chips about a 16th of an inch long found in all the World Trade Center dust by extrapolation about 10 tons. Turns out to be unignited nanothermite. And so they could easily have found this stuff. I mean, this is incredible.
Why doesn't NIST, isn't their job to find out scientifically what happened, right? That's their job.
Yeah.
So why are they saying that Tower 7 wasn't blown up, that normal office fires brought it down? Why would they say that? They're scientists.
Well, they don't follow the scientific method. We've documented that very well in our DVD. What they do is they launch straight for the hypothesis of destruction by office fires, which is completely untenable just on the face of it.
Maybe they found scientific evidence that
how many people are they? How many people did NIST consist of? Like, what's their board? Their board of executives that call the shots, right? Like, is this like a group of 5 people?
I don't know how many are on the board.
You know what I'm saying? Like, how many people are upholding these
So there's a
lies.
group of scientists that are paid by the government, and they're called NIST, and they're trying to convince everybody that Tower 7 wasn't blown up, and that normal office fires brought a 47-story skyscraper down at free fall speed. Why are these scientists giving us non-science? Why are they doing this?
I can't speculate as to their political or financial motives, but I'm sure that each of those are there operative in this because they did not follow the standard rules of science, which say we objectively look at all the hypotheses, lay them out. Like, for instance, maybe it did come down by explosions. Maybe it did come down by fire. Maybe it did come down by controlled demolition. These are all rational hypotheses, given that the building looked exactly like a controlled demolition. That fires never brought down a skyscraper should have been the first hypothesis that they looked at, but they never seriously considered it until thousands of people wrote in saying, hey, this looks like controlled demolition. Hey, FEMA themselves documented very carefully in this Appendix C the evidence of thermite with liquid iron, which is the byproduct of thermite, with sulfur, which is added to thermite to cut more effectively through steel, with molten iron, which is the byproduct of thermite. And this incredible heat, 4,000 degree temperatures, could only be explained by thermite, not normal office fires. The hottest office fires imaginable are like 1,400 degrees. So it just doesn't make any sense. They're still missing twice the temperature.
And every now and then, like in, I think, Popular Mechanics, or they'll do like was Tower 7 a controlled demo? They'll do, then NIST will pipe in, and people read that. And why does a magazine like Popular Mechanics or like Time Magazine, why do they take everything the scientists at NIST?
It's like CIA, right? They're like owned. I watched documentaries on
what
this.
Is it?
The CIA owns all those guys and tells them the official story and to repeat it.
We do know that the entire board of Popular Mechanics was replaced by the cousin of one of whom was the cousin of Dick Chertoff. So after 9/11, so their reason for being after 9/11 seemed to be producing this article debunking, trying to debunk, discredit the 9/11 truth movement, and they wrote this book also. And they don't even mention that there's 2,800, well, at the time, 1,300, I think, architects and engineers calling for a new investigation. They actually say there's no architects and engineers backing up your guys' theory when we've been around for 10 years now, building up from one architect and engineer, myself, to 2,850 at this point.
And now how many, because someone would say, okay, that's 2,800 architects. I mean, how many are there? There's probably about 100,000. What about the other 97,000?
Right.
What about them? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's 97,000.
Matrix.
It's 97,000 architects against 2,800.
It's actually not. And that's what's
But that's how
fascinating.
people will look at it. Explain
Well,
that.
some people do look at it that way. But first of all, if 2,800 architects told you that your house was in danger of collapse, would you listen to them?
Not if 97,000 said it was fine.
But they didn't. That's the thing. What we've learned, as I mentioned, in the last 10 years, every conference we go to, most of those architects and engineers don't even know about the third worst structural failure in modern history. They're not informed. And relative to the Twin Towers, they're completely unaware of the information, the evidence that suggests strongly that they were also brought down by explosive and incendiary controlled demolition.
So you break them down one by one. You have showings of your work. You have a documentary called, what's it called?
Yeah, 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out. I mean, this thing, this is 40 high-rise architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, controlled demolition experts, all laying out this evidence. It's really well done.
Aren't they putting themselves at risk, though? Isn't it kind of risky coming out as someone who's questioning Tower 7 as far as being part of the, isn't that an association? It's called like American Architects Association. What's it called?
The American Institute of Architects doesn't yet attack its members for coming out in favor of a new investigation. I mean, there's 2,850 of us all together with the engineers. So it's.
You planning on getting the other 97,000?
Oh yeah, we're
Is
not
that the
stopping.
plan?
Yeah.
What's the plan for you?
Well,
What is
we
it?
have to educate the profession and the academic institutions as well.
You got to go after them first. Yes.
And
Smart.
for instance, we have 2,000 sustaining supporters who provide us monthly income to go and do, and we have a staff of 4 or 5 to go all around the country and educate them. So one of the things we're doing is we've hired the University of Alaska's Leroy Hulsey, one of the top forensic structural engineers in the country, the chairman of the Department of Civil Engineering there. He's conducting a 2-year, $300,000 study for a computer dynamic analysis, which is a computer program and a project that will show what could or could not have brought this building down. And NIST, he'll do the program that NIST never did. And he's already come to preliminary conclusions, such as fire could not have brought this building down. No way. He said he would fail students who provided the work of the quality that NIST provided. He's gone through and highlighted point by point so many mistakes, and not just mistakes, but obvious evidence of fraud in their case.
Now, your DVD is includes a bunch of architects and engineers and chemists and all sorts of scientists, right? There's a bunch of them, one after another. Is there a DVD that has a bunch of random architects and engineers and chemists saying that it did go down because of fires?
No.
There's nothing.
No
one's saying that.
NIST didn't produce anything. No one else has produced anything.
Can you imagine that if they went?
It would be laughable. Ed.
Yes, they should do it. NIST, if you're listening, you should do it. Just get a bunch of actors
Step your game up, NIST.
posing as chemists and architects and engineers. Yeah. Can you imagine how they'd have to give a presentation of like why NIST is not lying?
It would be laughable. This is why it's not been
I wouldn't
done.
put it above them though.
There are no scientists out there because people say that. Because what about the scientists that are saying this? I mean, I read it. The scientists are saying. What about these scientists?
They're hiding in the shadows. They're not coming out. I mean, somebody interviews them, like Sham Sunder, the lead engineer.
There's only a couple guys, right?
They're all government dudes.
Because they got to make
John
it like
Gross.
one spokesman, right? Because they can't have. There isn't a DVD out there. There isn't a YouTube video out there that has 30 minutes of a bunch of different random architects and engineers trying to prove that Tower 7 was brought down by fires the way NIST, government scientists, getting the whole world to believe that.
It's nobody else except government scientists trying to say the official story, right? It sounds like anybody else except the official government people all agree with alternative theories.
What evidence did NIST provide to prove their theory of, the fires brought the towers down?
Well, they did. First of all, the steel was illegally destroyed. This is the illegal destruction of evidence in a crime scene, right? I mean, we're talking about 40,000 tons of structural steel, which, by the way, was 5 times stronger than it needed to be to keep this building up. But 99% of it was shipped to China for recycling before forensic investigators could get their hands on it and do a proper investigation.
Is that fishy to you? Does that smell fishy?
Come on. I mean,
cleaning up their mess.
I mean, and the 2 pieces that they did save, what do they show? Partially evaporated beams, which is evidence of 4,000 degree temperatures, which can only be created by an incendiary like thermite.
And there's reports of everyone saying bombs are going off, firemen saying bombs going off, policemen saying bombs going off, people that worked at the building, security guards saying bombs going off, bombs here, bombs there, bombs there. And NIST did not check for bombs, any explosives.
Well, they said we didn't find any evidence for explosives. Later on, they were asked, and a year later, they provide in writing a statement. We did not look for evidence of explosives or explosive residues.
NIST, the government scientists, said that they did not look for...
After claiming that they didn't find them. I mean, you can't find what you're not willing to look for, right?
That's brilliant.
Oh.
Brilliant.
Oh, they've been brilliant.
They didn't lie. We said we didn't find anything. We didn't say we looked for it.
Yep, exactly.
They didn't lie.
Brilliant. This is extraordinary. And yet there's all these evidence. I mean, there's hundreds of witnesses of explosions at the Twin Towers.
I think they like that. I think they enjoy just being sloppy and
Just throw out a
laughing.
teaser every once in a while.
They get drunk, order pizza, and they just laugh their asses off.
It could be. It could be, but we're
I'm not
relentless.
surprised. I'm not surprised. All the conspiracy theory. I mean, my first conspiracy theory was 9/11. I was like 18 when I heard this happen. My mom came yelling at me. You know, we all have our story of how you first heard this. You know, but that was the first big shock to me. And actually, my first big shock, I always say, was Santa Claus. When I confronted my mom about Santa Claus, and she told me, "Yeah, shut up and don't tell your little brother about it." And I was like, "Oh, and you want me to lie too? You want me? I confronted you about the lie, and you want me to maintain the lie for you?" That was a big one. Then when my brother told me wrestling was fake, that was a big one. I'm still kind of like traumatized from that to this day. I was like 12 years old when I was finally like, "Fine, Eric, okay, Hulk Hogan's not the man." And then then when I found out jiu-jitsu's been a secret, and I was always like karate and taekwondo and all this stuff, and I was like 18 or 17, 16 when I found jiu-jitsu, right? And I was so upset, like, man, how come this information has not been presented to me, right? How many times is this going to repeat in my life? How many times is this going to happen to me where I'm positive about something and then all of a sudden some new information comes and sweeps the rug out from underneath me, and I feel like I'm like falling and like my whole worldview is having to be changed. And then 9/11 happened, right? And it was like, yo, the official story, of course, it's presented to me. That's what's on TV. I see it. And then you start hearing the conspiracy theories, like, yo, inside job, all this stuff. And I started seeing your videos, and it's like, okay, that led me now. What else should I question? Then I started questioning the JFK thing, and I've seen all these videos about how the JFK and the 9/11 thing were similar, how they had a big plan. They kind of messed it up. They had to do a lot of cleanup work, and the cleanup work has left a lot of evidence behind for people like you to be able to have, something to say.
And there's a lot of it. And when we present this to the architects, I mean, it's amazing. They, including myself, 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, when I learned about this, I was a flag waving Reagan Republican. I supported Colin Powell as he was making his indisputable case for weapons of mass destruction.
So at some point, this was a big challenge, a change in your point of view.
It turned my worldview upside down.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very difficult for architects. They don't want to imagine,
and that's a hard part for most
that
people,
there's
right?
a conspiracy here, that this is some sort of an inside job, which obviously it is.
Yeah.
We don't talk about that, but the implications are rather obvious once they realize that, oh my God, this building did come down just like the old hotels, which means somebody had to place those explosives.
And that's where you stop, though. You stop once you present the information. You don't like come with like your own conspiracy theories of what you think actually happened. You're just like, here's some information that's contrary to what we've all been told. It's obvious. Let's look at it.
Yeah, we're architects. We're technical and building professionals. We're not criminal investigators. We're not conspiracy theorists. This is the job for, others, journalists who should be doing their job, and reporting this stuff. But the mainstream media simply parrots what they hear from the government. So they don't do any investigation.
How's the teaching going? I mean, how frustrating do you get going across presenting this information, and probably still 15 years, 17 years later, whatever it's been, people still like think you're crazy?
Well, some people do. They have all kinds of reasons. But everybody who's willing to look at the evidence squarely comes up with the same conclusion, and most of them join us in calling for a new investigation.
What's the success
rate? My job
rate?
is easy.
What's the success rate?
90% of people that sit down want to join.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For instance, I went to a high-rise architecture firm here in Los Angeles, which is the reason I'm in town, HED Architects. They have 100 high-rise architects, 100 architects, and they do a lot of high-rises. So they called us in. They said, can you present your approved course? Because we're now approved by the AIA with 7 different courses. And they get credits. They have to have 18 credits per year to maintain their membership in the AIA, which is great because we have this great program. And to learn about Building 7, which they don't know anything about, most of them in the room, by a show of hands, were unfamiliar with Building 7, which is just extraordinary, as we mentioned, on the face of it. But after the presentation, after they actually look at the evidence, some of them had left. There were 29 to begin with that actually showed up for the presentation. We had 17 calling for a new investigation, and 2 saying that, I think we think NIST did the investigation right. I mean, that's the kind of ratio we always get.
There's always 2.
Well, there's always, not yesterday. We did a public presentation at the Colorado Center in Santa Monica. We had 46 people there. all of them raised their hand for a new investigation.
Nice.
Yeah. Sometimes it's unanimous.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't break that mass hypnosis.
It's hard, dude. That's hard.
There's nothing
It's
you can
deep.
do.
But
Can you imagine if there? I think the problem with Tower 7 was maybe that the video, all those perfect angles, those video angles, were released too soon. Can you imagine if there was no angles and it was just a rumor that there was another tower called Tower 7 that went down and there was, 100 people who saw it go down? Nobody would believe it. They'd be going, "Where's the video? Where's the video?" Nobody would believe that.
No, that's
I
true.
wouldn't believe that.
I wouldn't believe.
And then 10 years later, they drop the video. Can you imagine? It would break the world. It would break the media. But it came out right away. So right away, they had to address it.
Not on the media. It didn't come out right away. I mean, they showed it once or twice, and then a year later once. I mean, three times.
No. On the internet. It was all over the internet.
all over the internet.
Yeah.
But
From
the
day
mainstream
one.
media is censoring this subject.
Oh, yeah.
This should be the most studied building failure in all of history. I mean, a completely unprecedented destruction by a few small scattered office fires. Never happened before in history, and yet there's been no upgrading of the International Building Code structural section relative to this collapse whatsoever. I mean, that's
surprised.
unconscionable, untenable.
I'm not surprised.
Now, TJ, what are you thinking so far? You have any questions? What are you thinking?
I'm taking it all in again. Like, again, I just found out that a building that I didn't even know existed fell as well.
Crazy. I can't believe you just heard that today. Are you
know.
joking?
No, I'm not
It's
joking.
normal.
You didn't-
It's normal.
I don't watch YouTube all day. You know what I mean? Like, I worry about who fell out of the next UFC Fight Night card all day. But like, what's really interesting to me is the whole idea that the pillars or whatever like started this thing on fire, right? Like that's the whole issue of how this building started on fire. Like, to me, the odds, like, were there pillars on the ground that were flaming? Because, like, when something explodes and transfers itself into another building, like, what are the odds it goes clean through a window and starts a building on fire, right? Like, it should be on the floor. It should be on the ground, right?
Well, there should be a stacked up pile of 110 floors in each of the towers.
Right.
Right? And this is concrete that's 4 inches thick, most of them. Some of them are 8, some of them are 12 inches thick in the mechanical rooms. And those concrete slabs, which were poured over 20 gauge, I think it's 20 gauge, fluted metal decking. So there should be a total of 220 acres of this metal decking. And all stacked up. Each floor was an acre in size. These are huge buildings. Should be stacked up 20 stories tall. But what do we see at the bottom of this collapse? We see a 2-story pile of core columns, perimeter columns, nothing like a pancaking collapse whatsoever. Where did 90,000 tons of concrete go? It's not sitting at the bottom in these floors. You look in the first 4 seconds, you can begin to see that it's being pulverized in midair in these massive clouds of pulverized concrete and heat that's expanding. I mean, the heat caused these beams to go into noodle shapes. It's incredible heat, and that's
crazy.
The kind of heat that thermite releases. 4,000 degree temperatures, thousands of incendiary chemical reactions could create massive heat up there, which is also the reason for the rising plume up above.
Amazing, dude. Amazing.
You know, I think people have a hard time believing it was blown up. Tower 7 was that they can't believe that where's the motive? There's no, like, why it's so hard to do. What is the motive? Why would a group of people conspire, and how could they even pull that off? How could they put explosives in Tower 7? It just had to be those fires. We just have to believe in this. There's no what's the motive?
Well, regarding access, if you get access to the the elevator shafts, you have access to the core columns and beams in each of these buildings, all 3 of them. And there was a large elevator modernization going on the 9 months prior to 9/11, which could have given operatives all the time that they needed to set and place these explosives.
So there was some elevator work done right before this.
Oh, it's very well
For
documented
months.
in Elevator World, March of
Coincidentally.
2001.
How much time does this take them? Months, right? This is a few months long process to get it all fused and wired together. And plate charges and set
9 months. That gives them 9 months right there. March of 2000.
They were putting thermite. The idea is that thermite was in here, was already like in these buildings waiting to.
It had to be. If it was blown up, there had to be explosives, and then someone would have had to have loaded the explosives. Now, when can they have done it? Oh, coincidentally, for months they were working in the elevator shafts.
And guess who had that contract? Ace Elevator. Ace Elevator came out of nowhere, virtually nowhere, to get this contract from Otis. They're just a nothing of a company. Before 9/11, they had very small contracts. All of a sudden, they got the biggest contract in the world for the largest elevator modernization in the world, and they went out of business the next day.
Is that normal? That's not normal for a new company to get a big contract like that?
I don't think so.
Maybe they gave them a good deal.
Otis elevators too, by the way. Like every elevator you've ever been on is an Otis elevator. Just look at the floor.
And back then, true too.
I'm curious too. This is Tower 7. How many towers were there?
There was a few.
11.
And how many fell? Just 3?
Well, there's only 3 buildings that completely collapsed. The others were damaged, badly damaged, and there's 7 altogether.
And there was evidence of bombs going off in those buildings too, right?
In Building 6, there's evidence of explosions, yes. There's also evidence of molten metal dripping from the window. So it appears that the elevators were taken out because there's these holes in the building above Building 6 as you look down on it around the elevator shafts. I mean, that's the Treasury Department. So there's all kinds of financial shenanigans that have been documented very carefully by James Corbett and others with regard to these towers.
Could you imagine if this happened today and people were out there with drones, how many private feeds of video we would have? Because you can't go anywhere now without drones getting thrown up in the air.
Were there? Do you know about a lot of videos being suppressed? Video footage of closer video footage of the Tower 7 going down.
I think it's all on YouTube.
I mean, all
the worst one is Tower 7.
Tower
7
you've seen is all the footage we've seen, right? You haven't seen other footage that I haven't seen.
I don't know what you've seen, but everything I've seen came off the internet.
Okay.
What about that demolition expert that you got on your DVD? That I think he was from Europe.
Yeah, this is Danny Jawenko, one of the top European-controlled demolition experts.
He's on your DVD.
Yep, and
what did he say?
Somebody opened up their laptop, showed it to him. He didn't tell him where this happened, but he's showing him Building 7.
And this is in your DVD. It's filmed on your DVD.
Oh, yeah.
His first reaction to Tower 7.
Watching the thing
and he has
down.
no idea what it is.
Right, and he says, well, it's a controlled demolition. A team of experts did this professional work without a doubt. Interesting. And then they say, well, did you know this came down on 9/11? He goes, what? Really? Are you kidding me? And so he says, well, they must have worked very fast because he knows it's a controlled demolition, but he can't get it into his head because you can't go into a building in an afternoon and bring a building down. It just doesn't happen. Which brings up Larry Silverstein's comment on PBS. A year later, he's interviewed on America Rebuilds program. And
he's the guy who owned the Twin Towers.
He built...
he owned the whole complex.
He secured the ownership of the rest of the complex from the Port Authority, a public agency, in just 6 weeks prior to 9/11, and then provided massive terrorist insurance on it. He had already built Building 7. So regarding Building 7, he says, well, there's been such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And so they gave the order to pull, and we watched the building come down.
I seen a video where they call a demolition company, and a guy says, hey, what does the term pull it mean? And this woman goes, what? Hold on, let me ask one of the guys that works here. The front, she goes and asks one of her bosses, hey, what does pull it mean? And he goes that means blow it up. And she comes back, and she goes yeah, that's the term they use when they're going to blow up the building that's been charged. And he's like, thank you, and hangs up on
That's
her.
a terrible secretary. She should have known that.
Well, he says later, I didn't mean pull the building. I meant pull the firemen out of the building. He explains, later when everybody's going, what the hell did you just say? So, but the firemen weren't in the building. They were told not to go fight the fire in the building. They were told it had structural damage and that it was going to come down.
God, those poor
the firemen
no,
were told that.
Yeah,
and they didn't even really think about it. They just thought,
how could they do that to our firefighters?
No, they're scratching their heads. And then an anonymous structural engineer was asked by which chief was it? One of the fire chiefs. We got a quote in our video, and he says, we asked him, well, how much how much longer does this building have to live? And he said, about 5 hours. Sure enough, 5 hours later, it comes down. That's a completely unprecedented destruction by fire of an intact building. It's never happened, and all of a sudden he's accurately predicting the hour of its destruction.
No building ever, no skyscraper ever has collapsed at free fall speed because of fires, right? It's never happened.
Yeah, the only way that happens is with controlled demolition.
And the only way to get a
no skyscrapers ever collapsed. Period.
Without controlled demolition.
Right, without controlled demolition.
Now, so the basic science
or earthquakes can bring buildings down sideways. That fall over.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong though, but this is my basic understanding of how buildings collapse like that. It makes sense. All the beams the core beams, they got to blow up at the same time. Otherwise, you're not right.
If you don't have that precision, that building's going over.
Yeah, if you just blow up one beam, if you just fucking blow it up, it's not going to go down like that, right?
No,
that's common sense, right?
It won't go down at all. These are very robust.
You got to blow them.
That's a good question.
Yeah, like for me, like I would like if someone told me that, like to bring down a building, a skyscraper, you got to blow up all. If they gave me a choice, you blow up all the beams at the exact same time, or blow all the beams up a minute apart. I would go all at the same time.
Yeah.
Well,
right?
You guys ever play Jenga? I mean, the building always falls over because you pull one side out. It never goes straight down.
Exactly.
You have to remove all 80 columns in this building to get it to come straight down. At the same time.
It's the only way. Fires can't do that.
You start with the core columns. 24 core columns around the elevator shafts have to come out first. Why? Because that then pulls in the exterior, so you don't have the exterior frame falling outward to hitting other buildings. You want to create a nice, neat pile, and that's exactly what we have at the bottom of Building 7.
So those first explosions that everyone's hearing while the building's still up, they're getting the elevator shafts. Because that's what the reports were. People were saying, we were walking down the fire stairs, and then the elevator blew up, and everything. There's so many reports of that.
And the official response to that, of course, is, well, the jet fuel somehow leaked down the elevator shafts 1,000 feet, and somehow created this perfect air-fuel mixture ratio, and then was somehow ignited and caused those explosions. But there's no soot, which air, this is basically kerosene. It burns.
But in Tower 7, there was no
smoky.
jet fuel in Tower 7.
Right. And Tower 7, there's no plane, there's no jet fuel, there's no diesel either, by the way, which was one of the early reasons put forth by NIST. And what worked into Popular Mechanics, and they're still saying, those guys at Popular Mechanics, all that diesel fuel. Well, there were generators on the 5th floor, but there was no fire on the 5th floor. The louvers were not smoking or anything. So they had to withdraw that. But Popular Mechanics is still putting that out.
Pardon my ignorance. These are the problems with these conversations, Eddie. I'm always coming in way into the conspiracy. I need to start.
No, it's perfect.
I need to start.
No, we need your point of view.
Yeah.
Because you're the average guy.
Sure.
Yeah. You're the average architect, TJ. They have that much knowledge.
Perfect.
So you can be proud.
So
nothing is structurally sound then.
Based on the evidence he's talking about, and based on you just looking at the video.
Sure.
Just looking at the video. Come on.
But I'm curious. So where does this conspiracy begin? Does this begin with there weren't radical Islamic terrorists in the planes? The planes were flown by the government.
That's a fair question.
Who knows?
So
it could be anything.
So I'm just trying to figure out.
There's a lot of theories.
This idea is strictly about Tower 7 falling. This isn't about 9/11 as a whole. This isn't about, was it an inside job to start the terrorist attack?
Well, we start with Building 7 because it is so obvious to virtually everybody, anybody with an open mind, half an open mind. We got them based on the scientific evidence. Then they start asking the questions you're asking. Well, what about the Twin Towers?
Right.
Well, the evidence there is overwhelming. We've been talking about that as well. Well, then they say, well, what about the planes, right? So most 9/11 researchers have come to the conclusion that these planes were drones. They were outfitted with remote control, that they were actually not the same planes that took off, that they were substituted, and there's evidence to suggest that.
They were empty or something. All these people were not in them. I've heard this.
Yeah. Pilots for 9/11 Truth has done a good job showing that they were actually substituted with other planes.
Holy shit! There's
military.
Pilots for 9/11 Truth.
Oh yeah, have them.
Are you kidding me?
Oh yeah.
I gotta see this.
Oh, it's awesome.
Wow, I didn't know
.org,
that.
pilots4911truth.org.
What are they saying? What are they
there's
saying?
one interview. They do work on the Pentagon as well, which did a plane hit the Pentagon or not?
What do they think?
They really go into that.
They think they don't
think
hit?
no, they don't think a plane hit the Pentagon, and they show the ridiculousness of that situation in Shanksville, where there's again, no people, no luggage, etc., no plane in this hole in the ground.
The passenger list and the people that supposedly died on these planes? Didn't people die? Isn't there like a?
Apparently, we don't. We just don't know. Did they die? I don't know. Were they on the planes? I don't know. Were they killed? I don't know. Nobody. Well, somebody knows.
Isn't there a passenger list, and you could check in on them? And I mean, people died.
They
right?
show as being dead officially. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they fumble so many big operations like this, like the JFK thing, this 9/11 thing. They leave so much evidence behind, showing that they were up to something. I'm curious, how many operations have they done where they didn't mess up, and we don't even know about them, and we're not even talking about them because some things it's just so the official story is not even questioned because they did a good job. And
anytime something happens, like some tragic event or anything, and the mainstream media is pretty much all agreeing on the same story, I'm highly suspicious. I'm like, this. What's the angle
I've
here?
lost my trust in the mainstream media completely.
And what about
our government? And that's really unfortunate.
And government scientists, right? It's hard to trust them, right?
And then you can't trust them either now.
Government
we've
scientists,
proven fraud.
right?
Yeah, that's right.
And this is not the only time where government scientists have helped in cover-ups and it just seems like.
What about before 9/11? Was there anything you thought fishy about? Anything you heard officially from the government? Like, did you hear, you know what I'm saying? Did you do JFK conspiracy theories before 9/11?
I had heard about it. I mean, I think 90% of Americans think that JFK was taken out in a conspiracy, but they don't kind of know the details like myself. They don't do the research like myself. I'm an architect. So when this came along and we have 3 buildings that are obviously controlled demolitions and that we've been lied to, I said to myself, no, this is where I draw the line. I'm an architect. I have the capability to see straight and to put the evidence together and to deliver it to my colleagues and the public and the media and government officials. And we've been doing all of that for 10 years. But these other conspiracies that I've become aware of, I can't really afford to be distracted by them because I've got so much work to do with what I do have credibility in, the buildings.
James, what do you think? We've never talked about Tower 7. What do you think? Be honest. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to believe it.
You guys are going to make me more of a weirdo. People already, there's that James again. I have to show them the evidence, and they either take it or believe it.
What do you think? You think Tower 7 was a controlled demo, or fires brought it down like NIST says? What do you think?
It sounds like a controlled explosion.
Right?
That's what it sounds like. If you look at the evidence, you guys are going to make me more of a weirdo. There's that James again.
Don't worry, you're next to me. You're in good company.
Okay.
TJ, any questions? Any other questions?
No, I'm just trying to wrap my head around everything. That's the thing. This is the first time I've really heard anything like this. So.
Do you think there will ever be a new official government
investigation?
There has to be. See, I have hope. We have 2,000 sustaining supporters that are saying, don't give up. And I'm just not in my blood to give up anyway.
Respect that. I got to respect that.
What are you investigating?
Go and go.
At this point, you were talking about the evidence, about how largely most of it was taken away and shipped out illegally for recycling. Well, what do we grab now? What can we actually examine?
The steel was, most all of it was removed, but we've got plenty of steel actually still in sculptures around the country and around the world. We have these reports that I mentioned in Appendix C of the FEMA report.
Sculptures?
May
what
of
do you
2002. Mean? Well, there are steel sculptures from the steel in the World Trade Center that's been erected.
Yeah.
And it's been analyzed and it has evidence of thermite residue on it. We're talking about iron oxide, aluminum, manganese, oxygen, silica, carbon.
that would still
the
be there. Like,
signature of thermite.
Pardon my ignorance to this. That stuff can't be washed off per se, right? Like this stuff is embedded and ingrained in the metal.
Yes, in fact, FEMA describes it and shows these pictures of it. It's almost like interlaced fingers. The invasion of molten iron into the steel. This is elemental iron. It's the byproduct of thermite, and a hot sulfur corrosion attack, which NIST says actually this sulfur. Oh, it must have come from the gypsum board. Well, there's calcium sulfate in gypsum board, but it's inert. It's never in 100-year history of using wallboard to protect steel. It's never turned around and attacked the steel that it's designed to protect. It makes no sense whatsoever.
Its physical makeup wouldn't have been altered to be put into sculptures or anything like that. I'm just wondering, like, to melt it and to mold it into whatever artwork it is now, would there have to be any sort of process for the artist to be able to make that steel more malleable, and would that have compromised its physical makeup?
They would use oxyacetylene cuts, which is a very hot combination of gases that cuts very cleanly through steel. For instance, at the ironworkers at the yard, we show the difference between the cuts that they make, which are very clean, and these jagged cuts with aluminum slag hanging off of them. There's one classic 45-degree cut on a vertical core column in the middle of the Twin Towers with a firefighter in front of it, and this slag is just pouring off. That's not a cut at the site. This is a typical classic shaped cutter charge cut.
Let me ask a question real quick, because you've said this a few times, and I've heard of this before. I've done a lot of conspiracy theory, and I hear FEMA all the time, and I forget exactly what the acronym is for and what they do. If you could give me a quick little rundown on exactly what FEMA is, I'm sure a lot of other people would like to know what that is.
That's the Federal Emergency Management Association, which does emergencies, and they had a drill the day before 9/11. They were in town with hundreds of employees in Manhattan setting up for a biological attack drill. You always got to watch out for these drills.
TJ?
And they went right into work.
Somebody told me there are no coincidences.
And they took control of this investigation right away.
Setting it up. They were putting all their people in place. They knew something was going to happen.
Yep. Tom Kenny from FEMA says, we came in Tuesday night, went right into work Monday night, went right into work Tuesday morning, the 11th of September.
Wow.
Now, I know a guy from a jiu-jitsu tournament years ago. We were hanging out, and we were partaking in natural medicines, and he told me that he used to work for one of the law enforcement / intelligence agencies. He was low level. He hated it. He was just, man, I hated it. He said, man, and I asked him about it. Well, where were you at? 9/11 got brought up. I don't remember if he brought it up or I brought it, but he said, man, he was trying to tell me how shitty his job is, because it's not all glamorous like you think. He quit. He just wanted to do. You probably know him too, Jeff.
He's still training.
No. He quit. So we're sitting there hitting natural medicines, and he's dedicating his life to martial arts now, and he hated it.
If he's doing natural medicines, I definitely know him.
Yeah, and he goes, man, put it this way. You know, when 9/11 happened, they shipped all of us to Manhattan. We were on bucket duty. I had a bucket, and all we did is pick stuff up and sift through stuff. It was just he hated it because there's nothing glamorous about it at all.
He's lucky he's still alive, because they lost 343 firefighters that day, and they've lost 1,000 since.
Really?
Due to cancers that they all got.
They all inhaled. I heard this. They all inhaled all the workers.
Asbestos.
Inhaled all the stuff that got it, and it just ruined their lungs, and they all died like 3 years later.
Yeah, and 6,000 of them are still sick, and those are just the ones that are on the official list.
Yeah.
I mean, how easy is it? Just put one of those little Japanese mask. You know, like the Japanese all wear masks.
Yeah. Well, none of that would have happened if these buildings weren't brought down with a controlled demolition. Those obviously those guys would have been fine. It's the controlled demolition that created the toxic soup, not the planes and the fires and so forth.
Well, this guy, hold on, let me finish the story real quick. This guy, we started talking about 9/11. He's saying he was on bucket duty, and I asked him, I go, did you know that a third tower went down? And he didn't even know. He said a third. He was there. He just saw a lot of destruction. He wasn't keeping track of what buildings went down. He went like a day or two later. You know what I mean? He didn't really even know. He was in deep on bucket duty, and he didn't even know. And then I explained it to him. I gave him just a little rundown, little Tower 7, little 3-minute scoop.
I mean, it's not like this was info that's compartmentalized. I mean, this was a giant building that you could hear.
But there was so much destruction. The Twin Towers came down. That was enough. Everything else is
at that point, they're just like, things are falling. Yeah.
It's the end of the world. Like, who's keeping track?
Yeah.
He didn't even know. And then when I explained it to him, generally when you explain something, when I explain something like this to anybody, like coming from me with zero college education, there are usually, if they're not already a conspiracy theorist, you're like, okay, where did you read this? On YouTube? You know what I mean? Generally. And then guys who are full-blown conspiracy theorists won't even need to check any facts. They'll kind of, you may be wrong, but I trust you. You've been right before. But this guy, he didn't even know. He didn't know anything about it. And I explained, that Tower 7 housed Enron, CIA, and all that stuff. We're talking about all these. What else?
Yeah, the Department of Defense, the Securities and Exchange Commission, the CIA undercover headquarters.
You know what he said? You know what he said? He didn't say nah. He said, "Oh yeah, they're probably trying to get rid of stuff."
Some people.
That's all he said. He was like, "Yeah, makes sense."
At least they have an open mind.
Yeah, he didn't even have to check.
I think
facts.
the JFK info was all in that building. Yeah. They wanted to take that building down because
they're trying to get rid of.
I always take it back to JFK.
Right?
Maybe. I mean, we don't know the motive, but clearly the fact that building came down with all of the rest, it allows the whole World Trade Center complex to be rebuilt very cleanly. The insurance covered it. In fact, it covered it twice because they got 2 terrorist attacks, so they got twice the amount that they should have got.
I don't want to die before we find out all this.
So
info.
did
$5.68 billion.
Did they? So they made a profit off the accident?
Well, the only money, that Silverstein put into was $125 million.
Okay.
Of his own, and the rest of it. This is a $3.2 billion acquisition. It was all leveraged, and he ended up with it free and clear. He didn't have to pay off his debtors.
So he's sipping Mai Tais on the island right now, laughing at all of us.
Yeah.
Down here.
So the plan is to try to get, is there a goal, 50,000 architects and engineers, 5,000, 10,000, and then something? Is there a plan?
I don't know what the magic number is. We have to go until we succeed. See, 3 years ago, we went to the AIA annual business meeting at the annual convention with a resolution that called upon the AIA to call for a new investigation. Now, we got 4% of the vote that first year, which is not very much. We're representing 10,000 architects, so that's 400 architects that were represented. But then the next year, last year, we got 11% of the vote. Well, that represents about 10,000 architects. Well, we're going to try to get 20 or 30% this year, and that is the day after tomorrow. Flying to Orlando, the national convention. It's a big day for us.
You're constantly flying around. You got people working for you doing the same thing. You training people.
Yeah. We have 100 volunteers all together, depending on how you count them.
And you guys are doing basically the same thing. You get people to watch this, right?
Well, yeah. This is our Solving the Mystery World Trade Center Building 7, 15 minutes, narrated by Ed Asner. The other one is 9/11 Explosive Evidence. Experts Speak Out. And that is the one that includes the 40 high-rise architects, structural engineers, metallurgists, chemists, physicists, all the rest of them. And so if they can watch this, we've got them because it's clear, convincing evidence. We didn't make this stuff up. This wasn't shown to them by NIST or by the mainstream media or by other government officials or other architects. I mean, it's incredible what you see and hear from these architects. Oh, these guys are just conspiracy theorists. I'm talking about from the board of the AIA. Called us wolves in sheep's clothing. Well, we're just trying to present basic facts about the unprecedented collapse of a high-rise building. This is extraordinary. And at 7 seconds, free fall, acceleration straight down into its own footprint. Just those facts alone, which are indisputable by any measure, should raise the eyebrows of people, and it does. I mean, that's why we tripled our vote last year, and why we expect to double or triple it again this year. So we're very excited.
See, this is why Richard is getting me more peaked than, say, Eric Dubé did last time, because more than anything, we need to figure this out so history doesn't repeat itself, right? Like, you need to make sure that things are designed a certain way not to fall, so we can get people out and whatnot. And, like, what also helps for me, Richard, is that you're not telling me that, I mean, maybe it's true, maybe there is more of a conspiracy here, but you're not telling me that, oh, for sure, 100%, we had, drone-piloted planes go into the, like, if you're going to accept a conspiracy, it's easier to do it in steps, in small steps. And the fact that we're just focusing on why a building that should be structurally sound, and the laws of science tells us that if it's going to fall, it's not going to fall this way, that's easier for me as a person who sits back and looks at you, Eddie, get fired up and be like, man, that guy's crazy. I don't think you're crazy, but you know what I mean? Like you're already so deep into it that you're passionate. For someone like me that's looking on the outside in, you need to work up to it, right? Like I need to learn how to shrimp before I can triangle you. You know what I mean? And that, to me, this one is ringing home a bit more than, say, the flat Earth.
Absolutely. Are you kidding? Tower 7 is this the easiest one. There's 5 angles. For me, I don't need the science at all. I don't need to investigate. I don't need the dust. I don't need the thermite. I don't need to see shit. I see 5 angles of a building. I'm not a building collapsing. I'm not an expert, but I'm hearing experts. And I'm not hearing experts on the other side. Just NIST, they're a government agency, government scientists. There's no, and when you watch these propaganda conspiracy theory, like pseudo conspiracy theory shows, like on cable,
A&E
or whatever, it's the
Channel.
the commercials about it draws in the conspiracy. There's was 9/11 an inside job? Find out tonight, And then when you watch it, it's clearly a propaganda piece. There's this one that I saw, the condescending narrator, the woman, the conspiracy theorists always say this, and conspiracy theorists think this, but scientists say this, and but scientists say that, but a conspiracy theorist might think it's ridiculous. And check this out. I'm waiting for them to explain Tower 7. I'm sitting there watching. It sounded like a legit conspiracy theory, open-minded one, like a real Detective Minds type of documentary, but it wasn't. It was clearly propaganda, and I'm waiting for them to get to the Tower 7 piece. Let's see how they explain that. And, sometimes there's little spots right before they go to a commercial, like, well, when we return, and then they show a little clip. They did that, and they ask a guy on the street about 9/11, and he goes, there was something strange about Tower 7. I mean, that building just falling at free fall speed. That's suspicious to me. And then they go to a commercial. I'm like, okay, now they're coming back. Let me see what they say about that. They never got to it.
Oh, really?
They never got to it.
Cute.
Interesting.
They gave you a little tease on Tower 7, but they didn't get back to it. Brilliant.
Just watch our commercials.
Yeah.
One of the things they did, National Geographic had a special on this, and they did an experiment. They had a little pool of jet fuel, and they lit it on fire. And above that, they had an 8-inch beam, steel beam, with a 1,000-pound load in the middle of it. And since the beam bent and the load went down, they said, see, this proves the official story is correct.
Yeah.
It's completely ridiculous.
Yeah, they got amazing experiments.
Yeah, and then they took a bunch of thermite and just poured it around a column and lit it, ignited it, and it sparks and puts off molten iron and everything, but it didn't cut the beam. They said, see, thermite can't cut beams.
Yeah.
Well, there are shaped cutter charges that are patented to cut beams with thermite, but they have to be shaped, contained, and that energy, molten iron, has to be forced through. In fact, it's much more effective than cutting through with standard shaped cutter charges like C4 and RDX. But those are, high energy explosives. They provide very loud bangs and very bright flashes. So you may not want those in a deceptive controlled demolition. Something that's more fizzle than explosion would work a lot better, but it leaves all this molten iron, which is found by dozens and dozens of witnesses, including Les Robertson, the World Trade Center structural engineer himself, documenting a river of molten steel. That's incredible.
What's weird to me, again, like I did no research about this, because I think that to a certain extent not having a prejudged narrative coming into this is kind of refreshing for the show a little bit. And so I thought we were going to be talking about the actual Twin Towers falling, like the big Twin Towers falling. And to me, like those falling the way they did is explainable in my dumb layman's head, because okay, the buildings are obviously compromised, there's fires inside, and there's also a jumbo jet sitting inside of it that's not supposed to be there. So maybe it fell because of the weight. This building, with what you're telling me, there's nothing but fires and flaming pillars from the Twin Towers. No, it doesn't go down.
Which
like
NIST said was not a significant factor in the Building 7's collapse also. But show Twin Towers collapsing. They both look exactly the same, almost. And so you'll see here that we have, and it's not explainable. Once you really start to look at it, we have upward, outward arching streamers, a geometry of fireworks, freely flying, laterally discharged 4-ton structural steel sections, trailed by these thick white smoke clouds landing 600 feet in every direction. Before that, we have a sudden onset of the destruction, just like Building 7. It drops suddenly and almost at free fall. It's getting faster and faster and faster from the top to the bottom in under 10 seconds, completely shattering the structural steel frame in both of these towers in under 10 seconds. Some people say 12 seconds. That's fine. It's still accelerating. It's nothing slowing it down. The 90,000 tons of structural steel below the point of jet plane impacts in the North Tower are not even slowing down, hardly at all. And it's 5 times stronger than it needed to be. So this makes no sense whatsoever. In addition, you'll see the 90,000 tons of pulverized concrete in midair, not after it crashes on the ground and breaks up into pieces. No, this is in midair. You have people that are distributed in every direction up to 800 feet outside the Twin Towers. Only 300 whole bodies were found out of 2,744, and 2,000 pieces of bodies were found that could fit into a test tube. One person was, they found 200 pieces of one person's body. These are pieces small enough to fit into a test tube. This is incredible. And yet still, there's more than 1,100 people that remain completely unaccounted for. They're vaporized. I mean, how do you vaporize people? How do you get 700 bone fragments a half an inch long on top of the skyscraper across the street from the South Tower? This is incredible evidence of explosives.
It just goes straight down. It just goes straight down. That's what's crazy to me. Like now that what we've talked about.
Well, you have asymmetrical damage from the fires. You have asymmetrical damage from the airplanes. Asymmetrical damage in the case of the South Tower. This top of this building, it actually begins to fall off. What we're looking at now is the North Tower. But in the South Tower, it actually falls over. But yet you have complete symmetrical destruction like the fireman described, wrapping all the way around the building symmetrically all the way down the building. And then you have these explosive squibs or isolated explosive ejections occurring 20, 40, even 60 stories down below this collapsing
What do you
building.
think about Dr. Judy and her theory?
This is the directed energy weapons theory, where she suggests that some energy was created to somehow turn the dust into steel. But we don't have, in all of the toxicological studies of the dust, we don't have steel dust. What we have is previously molten iron microspheres, comprising up to 6% of the dust. R.J. Lee says these are formed during the event. So this is molten iron, elemental iron, again, the byproduct of thermite, which has been aerosolized because of its surface tension. It forms itself into these spheres. And this comprises up to 6% of this dust. And they don't know where they came from. They don't even speculate where they came from. But it's not even World Trade Center dust. It's unless it has these unknown origin of these previously molten iron microspheres. And so this is completely contradictory to Judy Wood's theory, because she says it's a cold event. She says the steel is missing at the bottom of the pile. Well, it is missing. There's only 2-story pile of steel inside the footprint, but the rest of it's been distributed in a 1,400-foot diameter about each of the towers. That's where the steel is.
It's kind of like there's a double homicide, multiple stab wounds in someone's house, and they grab this knife expert who knew him somehow, and turns out there was another homicide that no one's talking about. A guy got shot in the head in another part of the house, and it turns out there's evidence that those 2 people that got stabbed also got shot. Something like that. Is the guy who they're accusing the knife expert? It seems like there was a cover-up. Seems like he was framed.
And
right?
do we have to have a motive for those homicides in order to begin an investigation?
Yeah.
No.
Like, why is that other person dead there? Why is that? And he's shot in the head. And then anyways.
You start with the evidence and you go where it leads. People say, well, they couldn't have gotten away with this. This makes no sense. You're talking conspiracy theory here. It makes no sense. So no, you start with the evidence and you build a case. You have an investigation based on that evidence. You let criminal investigators discover motive later as your case builds. And we've got enough evidence here to put a lot of people away for a long time for mass murder and treason.
That's a tough one for people.
Who would get, but who would, let's say we get 100,000 architects, the whole, everybody inside the association, including the board and the president, they're all behind it. Boom. What then? What happens then?
A lot of people go to jail, right?
Like, who's going to go to jail, though? I mean,
this has to get into the court system, and there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the court system is not fair, has been rigged, and I don't have the details on that, but there's a lot of researchers about our judicial system that suggests that it's very difficult to indict government officials or the government agencies. So we have an uphill battle, and I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, it all starts with public outcry, massive upswelling of indignancy and outrage on the part of the public. And I don't know how that happens. It hasn't really happened sufficiently yet, clearly.
Hasn't there been a study recently by someone in maybe a school or some kind of scientific institution in the UK or somewhere that made it official recently, like maybe a few months ago, that 9/11 had to be the buildings had to be, Tower 7 was blown up?
I don't
Have you heard
recall
about this?
that. We presented our evidence for Tower 7 in front of 70 firefighting professionals and fire investigators in Westminster just a couple of years ago.
No, wait a minute. A professor at BYU.
Oh.
Sound familiar?
Well, there's Stephen Jones, who formerly at BYU, who's a nuclear physicist who brought this evidence forward.
Okay.
But it wasn't presented officially at the BYU.
But didn't it was an article about it? It wasn't it published somewhere?
There's
a study.
There's a peer-reviewed paper, 24 pages, talking about the nanothermite chips that we talked about earlier. That's very well documented, and it by this team of 8 scientists who found these dual-layered red-gray chips of nanothermite, which ignite, by the way, when you put them in a heater, a differential scanning calorimeter, they ignite and produce what? Microspheres, molten iron microspheres, the same ones that are found and documented in all the World Trade Center dust by FEMA and by R.J. Lee and other environmental consulting firms, but they don't know where they came from. Well, this is where they came from, clearly, these nanothermite chips. This is very clear, self-corroborating, internally consistent, repeatable evidence in experiments that could clearly put a lot of people away. We just got to get it into the court system. I don't know how to do that.
I'm curious, Richard, if this was in fact an inside job to take down Tower 7, do you think that there would have been a much cleaner, better way to do it, or do you think that the evidence is here simply because whoever did do it didn't think that there would be any sort of investigation into a national tragedy like that?
Well, they seem to have their bases covered. They've got NIST set up, and they changed the leadership at NIST in order to come in and control the investigation, along with FEMA, to major federal agencies, which seem to do a decent job covering up the evidence, and yet there's enough evidence here leaking through the cracks, such as the Appendix C in FEMA, which documents thermite. It can't be anything else, and this other evidence. So there's enough to go with. I mean, we don't have a problem finding enough evidence.
Don't you think just the video is enough? Right?
Yeah, the video itself.
Like, why do we have to Why do we have to test for explosives? Well, can't you just see that it got demoed?
Clear. So
Jesus Christ.
All 3 towers. The videos give it away.
I need no more evidence.
Let me ask this: Is there a nation out there that has a national stance that this was an inside job? Because, like, for example, we're involved in Syria right now, and we attacked Syria because we believe that Assad launched chemical weapons against ISIS and his own people. Is there a country that looks at us that says, okay, this clearly was an inside job, and do they ever speak up about it, and maybe we don't hear about it? Is there anything like that to your knowledge?
There's been a number. I've been in 43 different countries now presenting this evidence, and we've had great mainstream coverage in Spain, for instance. The UK and France has been very difficult. Holland has been very difficult. We had 700 people come to the major museum in New Zealand, in Wellington. I had a tour of 8 cities through Japan, and the senator there, Yukihisa Fujita, actually presented our evidence before I ever came on the scene, in fact, to the, they call it the Diet, their Senate. But not enough has happened as a result of these efforts. We're just building slowly, creating a base, and it's just going to take a lot longer than I thought it would. I thought it'd be 6 months when I started 10 years ago.
Crazy.
But it's just slower.
It's hard to be the minority, though. It's hard to come out and say something like this and be ridiculed by everybody, and then they're like, wow, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, oh, I kind of don't. I thought I saw a video that made me feel like something was fishy, but then 5 people ganged up on me and made me feel like I was stupid, so I'm going to back off and go back to just agreeing with everybody else because I want to keep living my life. So I understand, I respect you for, coming out and taking a stance that's contrary to the mainstream, view.
Thanks.
And you've probably get a lot of heat and shit from friends and family and stuff. So I got a lot of respect for you.
Hey,
for doing that.
James. Next time we'll talk about music. We'll reminisce on the old days, Black and Kill Symphony, Resistance, and all that stuff.
Next show, just you and James.
Yes, that's what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to do that just to get away from the
Are
conspiracy.
you down with
theory
jiu-jitsu? You know anything about jiu-jitsu? Would you ever be interested in rolling sometime?
I do Aikido. It's
So it's similar. Yeah, I know all about
it. It's the gentle way.
Donkey guard for Aikido might be the shit.
That's another. Don't worry
He's
about
a
that. Don't
master
worry
of
about that.
donkey guard.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah.
We'll tell you about it. It's off air.
Did you know I named it Donkey Guard?
Is that you? Somebody? I didn't come up with it.
I named that a long
I love
time
it. Thank
ago.
you.
Back in the Bomb Squad days. we
Eddie
called
gets
it
the
Donkey
credit.
Guard.
Eddie gets credit for donkeys.
It actually happened a couple times in the UFC, the position, and I'm in Joe's ear, and I go, dude, there's Donkey Guard. And then Joe, on the UFC broadcast, says, oh, that's something that we call a Donkey Guard.
He didn't want to say it.
Yeah, he was embarrassed.
I just used it first in grappling.
Oh, you're the master, dude. We got a guy, Alex Magala. He's a Cirque du Soleil freak. He's all about Donkey Guard. Fucks people up with it too.
Respect. Thank you, Eddie.
We got to get out of here. TJ's in a hurry. For TJ, for James Watson, Jeff Glover, Richard Gage, I'm Eddie Bravo. Thank you. Who knows? We may do another show. We may not. I don't know. At least one more with just me and James.
One more show.
All music. No conspiracies. Nothing.
We shall see.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
The preceding podcast was a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be directed to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.